Move to section 2, building a fairer economy. I now call motion 33, universal credit. The General Council support the motion, to be moved by USDAW, seconded by PCS, and then I'll take additional speakers. USDAW.
President, Congress, Paddy Lillis, USDAW, moving the motion on universal credits. Colleagues, the impact the cost of living crisis has had on families in recent years has been devastating. The cost of basics like food, home fuels and transport has risen. Stress about making ends meet has risen, and real child poverty has also risen. Trade union members in their hundreds of thousands have been affected, and as trade unionists we are all out there day after day, month after month, year after year, fighting for higher wages and better terms and conditions at work to improve the living standards of working people. But despite this, the rising cost of living has outstripped wages, and now almost everyone is feeling the financial pinch. For some, the prices are even more significant. Many working parents, particularly single parents and people living with illnesses and disabilities, have felt the effects of the cost of living crisis even more acutely. And it's absolutely right that the very least a civil society should do is to ensure that people are supported when they need it. That children and families, older people and those who are ill, disabled or unable to work for whatever reason can live in dignity. Labour has also backed a system of welfare and social security as a safety net for those who need it. But Congress, the welfare state that the last Labour government did so much to bolster has been ripped apart over the last 14 years. And as the plight of so many working people and their families becomes so desperate, the Tory government didn't just sit back and let it happen. They didn't just fail to support those who needed it. They actively crashed the UK economy, making an already desperate situation even worse. And it's a disgraceful legacy left by the Tories that in 2024 so many working families are living in poverty. USDAW members like Stacey, who told us that the constant worrying about money and how she's going to get by each day and have food to eat is making her mentally and physically ill. Like Katie, who's had to stop buying fruit for her children because she can't afford it. And like Brian, who told us that money worries have significantly affected his mental health. And many, many thousands more like them. These hard-working people desperately need a break. Congress, this is such an important moment for all of us in the Labour movement. We have finally achieved that Labour government that we've all worked so hard for. There's light at the end of the tunnel for so many people, and none more so than those struggling on the breadline every single month. We now have a duty to make sure those people, those families, do not have to keep on struggling. USDAW is calling on the Labour government to take the action and support people like Stacey, Katie and Brian. The government has already launched a review to develop an ambitious child poverty strategy, because as Keir Starmer said when he launched that review, no child should be hungry, cold or have their future held back. It's encouraging to see that the government is making this a priority, and social security reform must be a key part of that strategy. That's why we want a task force specifically focused on universal credit, not just to make small tweaks around the edges, but to make real and lasting change as soon as possible. Make no mistake, this isn't going to be an easy task. The Tories have left us with such a huge mountain to climb, an economy in tatters, families in crisis, children in cold bedrooms with empty bellies. That's the shameful state of the country this government has inherited. But now I know we can deliver that change that's so desperately needed. This must be a priority for the TUC, for the government and for every one of us here today. Congress, please support the motion.
Right, I will call PCS to second, and I'm going to take Equity, Unite and CWU as additional speakers in this debate. PCS.
President, Congress, Beverley Law, PCS Deputy President, seconding motion 33 on universal credit and our amendments. So Congress, PCS represents tens of thousands of members working in the DWP who actually administer universal credit. Thousands of those members, though, working in DWP also have to claim universal credit to top up their low pay, and that is a disgrace. However, our members do know how the system works, and they also know how it doesn't work. What we do know is that more conditionality and punitive sanctions do not work. What we do know is that it doesn't create one single job. It does nothing to boost morale or skills of our workers. So when we surveyed our DWP members a few years ago, one job centre worker told us, "I came into this job to help people, not trip them up." Congress, we need a welfare system that supports people and gives them security, and that isn't the system we have today. In July, Labour proposed to cut the winter fuel payments from over 10 million pensioners. Labour says the cuts will save £1.4 billion, which is only about 0.1% of the government expenditure. Last year, the average pay of a CEO of Britain's biggest companies increased by 19% to around £5 million a year. The 10 richest people on the Sunday Times rich list have increased their wealth by 50% in the last 5 years. And when everyone else was seeing their real terms cut to their household incomes, others saw theirs soar. So Congress, Labour has no mandate to cut the winter fuel payments. It was not in their manifesto. I'm really proud of our Parliamentary Group Chair, John McDonnell, who voted against those cuts yesterday. But I'm also ashamed to belong to a Labour Party where so many voted yesterday to push so many more pensioners further into poverty. So Congress, PCS supports universal winter fuel payments and believes that the government should be increasing taxes too on the riches and the corporations, not taking benefits away from hard-pressed pensioners, especially as energy bills shoot up this winter. So keeping universal credit at poverty levels is a political choice. Cutting the winter fuel payments for pensioners is a political choice. And leaving children in poverty is a political choice. And Congress, let's all be clear today, these are the wrong political choices. So let's tax the rich, tax wealth, lift children out of poverty, allow pensioners to heat their homes, and build a social security system that provides a decent standard of living for all. Congress, please support motion 33 and our amendments.
Thank you. Equity.
President, Congress, David John, Honorary Treasurer of Equity, supporting the motion. Universal credit and the minimum income floor in particular are not fit for purpose for self-employed workers in the creative industries. Our General Secretary has already spoken here on Monday about the phenomenal success of our industry, how it guarantees growth, something the new government aspires to. Every pound invested in our industry brings back £4 to £8 to the economy. However, for us, the workers, we don't get fair support from universal credit in the inevitable periods between jobs. Our industry needs us, the workers, to be available, often at very short notice, and the minimum income floor punishes us for keeping ourselves available for work. This was shown comprehensively in a report from Warwick University that we commissioned back in 2023 called Not Here to Help. And in this report, and our own casework also shows us that nearly half of our members who have been subject to the minimum income floor are considering leaving or have already left the industry. Disabled workers moving to universal credit from working tax credit are signed off work. The minimum income floor means that these disabled workers are being pushed to the work capability assessment, which is regressive. Also, those without independent means, the bank of mum and dad behind them, are less able to continue in the industry, which inevitably leads to reduced class diversity and disability diversity. Who do we want to see on our stage and screens? And what stories do we want to hear? And it also throws people into poverty. It's harsher than the highest level sanction because it also reduces payments for rent and children, not just a personal standard allowance. As the author of the report, Dr. Heidi Ashton, says, and I quote, "There are well-documented inequalities in this sector, particularly in relation to socioeconomic status. The current social security system is forcing those who are most financially vulnerable out of the sector, restricting access to these careers. Congress Equity is calling for the minimum income floor to be abolished to keep working class creatives in our industry, and for universal credit to be reformed with meaningful consultation with Equity. Please support this motion.
Thank you. I call you Knight.
Chair, Congress, Jane Aitchison speaking in support of this motion on behalf of Unite the Union. Congress, I've worked in the benefits field for over 30 years, and take it from me, universal credit is malicious and it is cruel. It is complicated and it is mean and it is off-putting. Congress, it's heartbreaking to watch people try to navigate this hostile process. 6.4 million people depend on universal credit to get by, yet 8.1 million working-age Brits are living in poverty. This shows that not everyone who should get universal credit is claiming it, but that even when you are claiming it, you aren't lifted out of poverty, you're trapped in it. Then there are the sanctions which keep those on universal credit permanently fearful. The cruelty of stopping universal credit if you're late for an appointment or if you're deemed not to have worked hard enough looking for extra work. Universal credit is the opposite of social security. It is social misery. But what would you expect, sisters and brothers? This benefit was the brainchild of Ian Duncan Smith. He thinks that the people we represent who are forced to claim universal credit, nurses, shop workers, catering staff, and many, many more, are all just scroungers, when we know that they work their fingers to the bone and deserve much better. Congress, with the election of a Labour government, we should be able to expect better. There are so many positive changes to the benefit system that this government could make. So why would a Labour government start with picking the pockets of pensioners by removing the winter fuel allowance? Well, conference, the danger is, from the reports that we've read, is that pushing pensioners into poverty is a start of the attacks, not just on pensioners, but on universal benefits. And make no mistake, the universal benefits that we have all fought for include our NHS and they include our pensions. So Congress, stand with pensioners, stand with those forced to rely on our welfare system and defend the principle of universal benefits. Support the motion.
Thank you. I call CWU.
President, Congress, USDAW Elliott, first-time delegate, third-time speaker. We all know that universal credit does not work. It is a minefield of barriers to anyone, but even more so for disabled people. The policies implemented within the universal credit system are so poorly implemented they don't take into account their impact or the needs of other benefit systems, such as the policy of workplace capability, which many small to medium companies looking to employ a disabled person cannot afford to do so. This is due to backlogs in the access to work claims. This results in disabled people being left in limbo or potentially sanctioned. Further evidence of poor implementation of workplace capability policy is that those that are in employment and claiming universal credit will be sanctioned for taking their legally binding annual leave. As Universal Credit states, claimants must do up to 35 hours of work-related activity during their time off, putting the policy at loggerheads with employment law as well as human rights law. For many disabled people, the poor handling and mismanagement of universal credit at the hands of previous government leaders and policies that have led to threats and sanctions without factoring any reasonable adjustment for the claimant, disabilities or circumstances, which has sadly led to deaths of many disabled claimants. This all could have been avoided if we had a proper funding of the DWP, a proper reform of the benefit system, and a government willing to listen. We know this as the previous government was called out by the United Nations Special Rapporteur for their grave systematic violations against disabled people, of which benefit played a major role. We now have a Labour government. That means that they need to wake up, listen, and work with the experts in various trade unions and disability groups to fix things, not continue down the path that the Tories have broken. This includes abolishing their plan to cut the winter fuel allowance at the October budget. This would push approximately 1.6 million pensioners below the poverty line. 40 to 50% of those are disabled or have long-term illnesses, all while having a background of energy companies profiting £65 billion a year. We at the CW believe that Labour needs to stop, rethink and have adult conversation with the trade union movement and the experts in this field instead of reactionary policies that historically and financially do not work for working people and our society. We support.
Thank you, delegates, for those contributions. I now move to the vote on motion 33. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Will all those against please show. Thank you. That is carried.